Debbie Taplin, and I am a member of Indivisible Harlem. I come here today to speak not for myself, but on behalf of my patients. I am a native New Yorker who is fortunate enough to be firmly planted in the middle class with a good job and health insurance. My patients are not. I am a healthcare provider, and I work in a clinic in Washington Heights that serves only poor women. I understand that the governor wants to balance the budget, but must the poor bear the burden of this? Cuts to Medicaid will unfairly impact our most vulnerable. The clear answer to the $6 million problem is for New York to create a fair, just, and equitable tax system. As much as I love living here, I have to say that New York has long coddled its rich. And we have some very rich people in this state. As a matter of fact, over 80% of the uber wealthy live in a few neighborhoods right here in New York City. New York taxes people with extreme wealth at absurdly low rates, as well as offering outrageous tax breaks to companies and corporations. In addition, our property taxes unfairly burden our middle and working class residents. We need to tie property taxes to income and wealth in order that the middle and working class can continue to live in New York. New York cannot only be a state where the wealthy flourish. Tax justice means additional taxes on those that can easily afford it to help us fund well-documented needs in our state. Tax justice will regulate our economy to align it with democratic values. I urge you not to be swayed by the false assertions that additional taxes will cause corporations and the ultra-rich to leave. I urge you, our legislatures, to vote for changes that will make New York the standard bearer for budget justice and make New York a state where we can all live and flourish. Thank you.
That works better. Keep going. Thank you.
I'm Ricky Silver. I'm a co-lead organizer at Empire State Invisible. And as we enter the final weeks of budget negotiations in Albany, we're once again headed towards a fight over big money's role in our state politics. The current budget proposals fall woefully short of addressing the accelerating economic inequality in our state. And while the fight over healthcare, education, and housing funding has rightfully taken center stage, it's also important to note that the governor did not include any funding for reform fundamental to all these issues. The state's new public financing program. This program, despite having room for improvement, is New York's single best hope for reversing the flow of power in Albany away from the wealthiest and towards the people. Advocates across the state have rallied around public financing as a critical tool for reducing the influence of big money in our elections. Many of those same activists and organizers are now pushing for budget justice, challenging the legislature to deliver a vision for our state where all can prosper. Budget justice means taxing the vast, underassessed extreme wealth in our state to raise an estimated $35+ billion and investing it to make New York a better, fairer, safer home for us all. Recent polling has shown that 9 out of 10 New Yorkers support these policies. Yet the governor continues to push back on raising revenue to address these challenges in favor of an austerity approach that disproportionately burdens working families and poor across the state. When over 90% of New Yorkers support policies to tax the rich, and the legislature doesn't act, what else could explain this discrepancy other than the outsized influence of money in our politics? Much has been said about the result of the Public Financing Commissioning's work. It was certainly not perfect. But there are some really good important components to it, from reducing campaign contribution limits to the progressive public matching system designed to account for diverse incomes across the state's districts. We are poised to take the first step towards uplifting the voices of those that have been left out of the system. By law, our new public financing system must be up and running by November 2022, and there is a nominal amount of funding that's required to ensure that that gets up and running, $2.7 million compared to the $178 billion budget. I ask that you lead where the governor has failed. We can chart a new path for New York by acknowledging the inequality and tackling it with everything we have. We need a progressive tax system and we need public financing.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
My name is Jenny Zhang and I'm here today representing the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. Although my perspective has been informed by my experience in finance and policy, the opinions I'm about to express are my own. There's a lot that I want to say to you here today, because you all have a power that I don't. You all have the power to meaningfully change what life looks and feels like in this state. Unfortunately, I only have 2 minutes. I want to talk to you about the choices that you have made. Economic laws are not made by nature. They are made by human beings. They are made by the people sitting in your seats. Every single day, you have the power to change the shape of our economy. Is this economy something that you can be proud of? Do we really want the title of the most unequal state in the nation? This year, you have the opportunity to do something about it. I hear from the people who are actually really struggling. I hear from students who are not able to finish their college degrees because the Excelsior financial aid program for low-income families is a false promise. I hear from people whose tap water runs murky, the color of milk tea, right here in New York City. I hear from people whose parents are working on minimum wage, trying to make ends meet. There is vast inequality and unmet need, but you don't need me to tell you that. What you do need me to tell you is this. We are here on the outside, working day and night to educate people on how easy it would be to meet these needs. We understand how this could be done, by taxing the rich, their wealth, their ultra-high incomes, big corporations, and Wall Street. In fact, we have already prepared 17 ways for you to do so. Our coalition has found $40 billion per year for you to put to work on our needs. You have the laws in your laps, and our people are ready for things to change. These taxes would raise the funds needed to truly make a public investment in our people. A handful of these bills could each, on their own, raise enough debt to cover the entire $32 billion unmet need at NYCHA. Together, these bills would raise enough money for a future unrecognizable to the working class today. A real opportunity to go to college, public housing with no mold, rats, or heat outages, a real Green New Deal, meaning a massive public investment in New York State, and the ability to avoid cuts or a slowdown in growth costs to Medicaid recipients who are both sick and poor. I am not under any illusions. Money won't fix everything. But are we really going to continue to let money be the gating factor here in the second richest state in the country? This year, it has become the gating factor to one to many things, and we on the outside know that an alternative is possible. Our current economic structures and distributions are inadequate. You are all in a position to change that. Where will your choices lead you? For the next few months at least, you find yourselves in a position to decide, and I hope that you will join us.
Thank you, Senators, and thank you, Senator Serrano, for having us in your district. My name is Michael King. I'm with the Strong Economy for All Coalition, and I've submitted detailed testimony on the tax proposals, the specific methods that we can tax the rich. I wanted to speak for a minute or two on the social crisis of inequality. The last time I was at the New York Academy of Medicine for a state government event that was surrounded by police and barricades was during the AIDS crisis, when state government was refusing to take substantive action to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. Right now, state government is in the exact same position. You have the power to tax the rich. You have the power to house the homeless. You have the power to take action, to provide health care to every New Yorker. And state government, even with a Democratic majority, has not yet decided to use the levers of power to address the inequality crisis. We don't have people dying every day of inequality, or maybe do we? We have 92,000 homeless people. We have 150,000 public school students who go to school at some point during the year out of homeless shelters and temporary housing and hotels. Our state has a legitimate crisis of inequality. We have 112 billionaires with $525 billion in wealth. And this year we'll have, for the first time since the 1930s, a proposal for a wealth tax that could ask them to pay pennies on the dollar to contribute to the needs of the state. I think many here today support the strong functioning majority that Senator Kavanagh mentioned. We support the many, many achievements that you all have pushed forward over the last year. And we would like to see you step forward on inequality, on taxation, on budget justice, to address the needs of our state and to move our state forward. Thank you.
Most people are getting the hand idea as opposed to the letter.
Hi, good Good afternoon. My name is Camille Davis. I'm a civic-minded resident of Harlem.
Hold the mic closer.
My name is Camille Davis, and I'm a civic-minded resident of Harlem and a patriot who believes it is patriotic to pay one's fair share of taxes. I'm here to advocate for a shift in the budget paradigm and demand budget justice for the citizens of New York State. Governor Cuomo has built New York State's budget on principles of fiscal austerity. And I ask, has this made our state better? Is the upstate economy better? Has it solved the housing crisis, improved transportation or schools? No. It's actually accelerated the transfer of wealth towards the wealthiest among us. I'm asking my state representatives, Brian Benjamin, and I'm speaking to Inez Dickens, to support a budget justice package of proposals which includes a more equitable tax on big corporations and the ultra-rich. And I'll close with this short story. My son attends PS 180 in Harlem, and recently a young woman, Tessa, was killed in the park behind our school. The suspects in this case attended PS 180 and were known to have been at-risk youth. PS 180 is considered one of the brighter spots in the traditional public schools in Harlem. Often students in need of additional support or have had issues in other schools can elect to come to our school, and we welcome them. It is a belief that we are better equipped to handle these students, and that we are not. Many of our students and other students in our neighboring schools suffer from some of the highest rates of homelessness in the state. Many of our working poor struggle for the basics of life, and their children are also carrying these struggles into the classroom, therefore impacting the entire school system. Following the incident, the District 3 Community Educational Council had a meeting, and when we asked for additional funding to help with school security and counseling for our kids, we were told that, hey, you know, there's some foundation funding out there. Well, we all know that it's been well over a decade, and our schools have not been able to collect on this foundation funding. So I just want to be clear, I'm not asking for more money for my son's school. I'm asking for more money for our schools. I'm asking for more money for transportation, infrastructure, healthcare, housing. And I would curse right here, but something needs to be done about these explicit taxes that we have for homeowners, which I am a homeowner, so property tax system is cuckoo. So tax for ultra-rich big corporations, I want a just budget for everyone in this room. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call up the next panel.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senators, for hosting this important meeting and for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Laura Schindel. I'm an organizer with Food and Water Action. New York's ambitious climate goals will only be met if we provide the resources necessary to achieve them. We urge you to allocate $10 billion in state funding for a Green New Deal. And we call on the legislature to raise taxes on the ultra-wealthy to pay for the just transition off of fossil fuels. This level of commitment would create hundreds of thousands of well-paying union jobs that stimulate much-needed investment in low-income communities and communities of color. It would help ensure timely progress in meeting the goals of the new climate law, and it would improve the quality of public services like mass transit and the health and safety of New York's environment while reducing inequality. In tandem with policies to stop new fossil fuel infrastructure, a $10 billion investment in Green New Deal programs would give us a meaningful shot at reducing the pollution causing climate change and make New York a true leader. A 5% marginal income tax on the state's top 1% can accrue $10 billion a year to pay for the Green New Deal. It is those who are living in poverty who are most threatened by climate change, and therefore we have a moral imperative to tax the ultra-wealthy in New York to fund a Green New Deal to mitigate the impacts of climate change on low-income communities. Specifically, we call on the legislature to provide an additional $10 billion in Green New Deal funding for energy-efficient public and supportive housing, renewable and energy efficiency upgrades to homes targeted to low-income homeowners, mass transit throughout New York, publicly owned energy and a clean, modern grid, replacing gas guzzlers with zero-emission vehicles, upgrading all rent-regulated housings to eliminate fossil fuel use and air pollution, compensation for fossil fuel workers and communities dependent on dirty industries, and high-road labor standards to maximize good union jobs and hiring for low-income communities and communities of color. We're pleased to see senators taking positive steps already. We're grateful for Senator Metzger's bill that would ban fracking, and the bill includes language that would also ban gel propane fracking as well. We're grateful for Senator Hoylman's bills to impose pier-to-tear taxes and sales taxes on yachts and private jets. I urge all of you to fully embrace the call to tax the rich for a Green New Deal. We are quickly running out of time to avert the worst of the climate crisis. We can fight climate change while also fighting economic inequality. Please support this call, urge your colleagues to do the same, and push Governor Cuomo to back up his rhetoric with progressive new taxes to fund transformative action on the climate and inequality crisis. We need $10 billion for a Green New Deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Wendy Seligson, and I represent the Jewish Climate Action Network, NYC. We are a network of Jewish climate activists, parents, educators, youth, citizens, who educate and advocate for climate action. Recently, we helped to found the Jewish Climate Coalition, a growing network of nearly 40 Jewish organizations in New York City. And we are a proud and active member of the New York News Coalition. First, I would like to thank each of you and your New York State Senate colleagues for voting to pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act last year. And special shout outs to Senator Jackson, who has left, but has been a tireless champion working with us over the past 2 years. And thanks to Senator Hoylman and to you, Senator Serrano, whose staff we met with yesterday, Senator Krueger and Senator Kavanagh. We look forward to meeting with you. I am here to ask you to include the $1 billion Climate and Community Investment Fund in the 2020 budget. The science is established. Last year's IPCC report makes this clear. We have no time to lose in addressing the climate crisis. Last year, New York led the nation and the globe by passing the CLCPA. Now we need to continue that leadership and fund it. The Climate and Community Investment Fund is a first step. It's a down payment on the future. It funds climate, jobs, and justice now. For climate, it funds large-scale renewables to end deadly emissions. For jobs, it funds new green jobs and worker transition from fossil fuels. And for justice, it funds changes to lift up low-income New Yorkers and people of color living with excessive air pollution and facing the front lines of climate change. As members of the Jewish community, our Jewish values compel us to protect sacred creation. We stand with people of all faiths who share this imperative. And one last story. This past Rosh Hashanah, a Jewish holiday, Rabbi Ethan Lutowski of Park Avenue Synagogue in New York City wrote a very moving sermon entitled, This Eden Earth, reflecting on the precious environment he grew up with, the impacts of climate change, and how Adam and Eve worked to make things right after eating the forbidden fruit. He closed by saying, we have the power and knowledge to do this. We can make things right. It is now our task to endure pains and sweat as we labor to build a new sustainable world, not for us, but for our children. We urge you to include the $1 billion Climate Community Investment Fund in the 2020 budget to take this action now to make things right.
Thank you. And I didn't cut you off, but I'm going to now use you as an example. If you hadn't said nice things about us, you could have gotten to the points. We appreciate hearing nice things about us during politics. You all can escape that, okay? And just go to the points you want to make sure you get to.
You could just cover me.
Thank you. We'll talk later, Maureen.
Senators, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Tom Outerbridge. I'm the manager for Sims Municipal Recycling. We handle all of the metal, glass, and plastic, as well as about half the paper collected through the city's curbside recycling program, as well as recyclables from a number of Long Island towns. I was here a year ago talking about the crisis facing recycling programs, not just in New York, but across the state. The bad news is that crisis has not gone away. If anything, the situation has become worse. The good news is that there is this year a bill in Albany that would radically alter the situation for curbside recycling for the better, to provide permanent, lasting change. It's a Senate bill for extended producer responsibility for packaging materials. And the basic principle of packaging EPR is that producers who sell products into the waste stream, the municipalities that have to manage, pay a fee to cover or offset the cost of recycling that material. These programs are in place across Europe and Canada. This would be the first in the U.S. And the fee is tied to the recyclability of that product, so that not only do municipalities have a funding stream to support robust recycling programs, but manufacturers are incentivized to produce more recyclable packaging rather than stuff that ends up in the landfill. We have support for this from across the state. Basically every organization that represents the public sector that is responsible for implementing and managing, paying for curbside recycling programs support this, as well as a number of the advocacy organizations, NRDC, the Conservation Voters, and others. And I would just finally note that for the state, this will be budget neutral. Really what it is a funding source for the municipalities who are currently paying for these programs and trying to respond to global commodity changes, which is not really a strong suit for the municipalities. So this is really to take that burden off the municipalities. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Basta. As a social worker and member of the People's Climate Movement New York and the Steering Committee of New York Renews, it is critical for New York to increase funding to fight the climate crisis while continuing to fund housing, public health, education, and other needs. I reject pitting climate against other urgent needs and believe in this wealthy state, in this wealthiest of nations, we can and must find funding to fight the existential crisis. The climate crisis is rolling out globally at heretofore unknown speed. In the hottest decade in history, we all witnessed the massive devastating fires in Australia, worldwide flooding from surges and storms, tornadoes, and the rapid melting of the polar ice caps. We all agree that this crisis is escalating. As part of the New York City climate justice movement, I have yelled, screamed, politely lobbied, testified, sat in, acted, painted, sang, danced, and been arrested to try to elevate the climate crisis to the forefront of causes requiring action. What else do we have to do to get everyone's attention? Today I'm here to implore you all to fight for funding in this year's budget to implement the CLCPA. Last year, New York passed this historic legislation, and this year is the time to start funding it. Without funding, it is just another piece of paper, an empty promise. Specifically, I urge you to support the Climate and Community Investment Fund, which is $1 billion as a down payment on the promises made in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. To fully fund the CLCPA and actually make New York a leader in fighting the climate crisis will take many billions of dollars. But we have to start somewhere. At this time, as we understand it, there is no allocation of funds to implement the CLCPA. The CCIF, the investment fund, will go to 4 areas. $300 million for renewable energy, including solar, offshore wind, and updating our energy transmission and grid. These investments will reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and create good green jobs. Just a few more pieces. $300 million for community resilience, catalyzing community planning, and covering capital costs for efficiency and renewable programs in frontline communities who bear the brunt of the crisis. $200 million for transition protections. We must protect workers and communities in the transition off fossil fuels. As the granddaughter of a coal miner, I saw firsthand how communities fail when mines are shut down and no options are presented to workers. $200 million for energy efficiency and to reduce utility bills, specifically funding investment in low-income neighborhoods by directing funds through the Low-Income Assistance Program and partnerships with public housing and affordable housing developers. We're almost out of time to have an impact on the climate crisis. The cost of inaction will far surpass any investment we make now. We must all fight to rise for what we love, our children, our families, our communities, our habitable planet. And I urge you to sponsor the CCIA, the Climate and Community Investment Act, which was just presented to the Senate, which will raise $10 billion annually through a polluter penalty fee.
Thank you. Brad, you and I are gonna have to get here.
Okay.
Okay. Hi.
And instructions.
Eric Goldstein, Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you, Senator, and to all of you for your leadership. Last year was an amazing year, and I think all of us around here appreciate having the Senate Assembly work on behalf of everyone here in New York City. The issues I want to address today quickly are waste, plastics, the fossil fuel industry, and the climate crisis. First, we support legislation originally introduced by Senator Krueger that would ban polystyrene foam food and beverage containers. It's working in Maryland, Maine, and New York City. We're going to do it here. Second, we support legislation introduced by Senator Kaminsky that would ban these toiletry, little plastic toiletry bottles. The Marriott chain has agreed to do it. California does it. New York should follow suit. Third, we recommend the Senate advance legislation to assist local governments in covering the expenses of their recycling programs. This is the idea of extended producer responsibility that Tom talked about, help recycling programs around the state. Fourth, we recommend the Senate adopt legislation requiring localities to adopt plans to ensure that their food waste and yard waste is sustainably dealt with through composting or anaerobic digestion. This is the major source of methane emissions in landfills, and we need to treat food waste sustainably. It's a sensible follow-up to your climate action last year. And fifth, we support the concept of the Restore Mother Nature Environmental Bond Act, at least $3 billion, and to fully fund the CLCPA. Finally, we support tax justice, and we join with everyone here in urging that the rich and the ultra-rich pay their fair share to build a more equitable and sustainable society. Thank you very much for all of your great work.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. As you're moving down,
Just start.
everybody says, yes, thank you. I'm Mary.
I'm Mary Krasner, and I'm speaking as myself, although I'm a member of several parent advocacy organizations. It is an inconvenient fact that people like my son will never be independent. There's no finessing the cost of keeping someone with a 40 IQ alive and well, forget happy. And for me, there is no forgiveness for those who stand in the way of his being cared for properly. Along with other desperate parents, we wait to see if the MRT2, with no representation from families, adds their cuts to the ones the commissioner announced, 2% across the board July 1st. He said this right after saying that there are 7,000 new people in the system without additional money to cover the rising costs of keeping agencies' doors open, rent, utilities, etc. This financial squeeze threatens their survival, the agencies we entrust to take care of people, especially after we die. State-operated facilities have received trends every year. 2 days after that, they released a proposal to move services into managed care for everything, medical and habilitative needs. There is no money in this budget for administrative costs and no mention of where it is going to come from, but chances are from services, even though data shows that with managed care, quality of care declines and there are no savings, adding layers of administration and consultants, taking money from direct care. You cannot provide quality services and make cuts at the same time. Services are not only essential for people with IDD, it's an important employment opportunity where empathy is a measure, not business degrees. Taking apart this system by starving it hurts the person, the families, and the workers. Find the money. We recognize that there are real budget pressures, but this cannot supersede my son's right and others like him to be treated like a human being by caring people.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Karp. I'm the father of 2 young adults with special needs. And I'm here to give you an update. Last year, I sat in front of you and held up a blank piece of paper and complained that OPWDD was marching to managed care without the benefit of data, without the benefit of information. I'm here to give you good news. Unfortunately, it's not about the data dashboard. New York State continues to march forward without information. However, there's some good news out of Texas. The Texas legislature funded a study by Deloitte that surveyed 15 states that had implemented IDD implemented managed care for individuals with developmental disabilities for long-term supports and services. And I'll go ahead and read you the summary from Deloitte. While there are savings achieved in long-term services and supports claims, the amount of increased administrative expenditures outweighs savings from claims. That is, there is no cost savings. From another study out of Texas, we've learned that there is no gain in equity, no gain in access, no gain in quality. So to summarize, what we now know, due to the state of Texas, is that there's no cost savings, access and quality might get worse or might get better. It's time to put a stop to this disruptive experiment, which not only fails to decrease costs, but also puts our most vulnerable citizens at risk. Please halt managed care for long-term supports and services now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for having me. My name is Deirdre Garrett-Scott. I am the Director of the New York City Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. I'm here on behalf of the state program as well as the New York City program that's assisted by Sydney. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program was created and pursuant to the Oldest American Act. The mission of the New York State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is to serve as an advocate and resource for older Americans as well as people with disabilities who reside in long-term care facilities, such as nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and boarding care homes. LICOP is also charged with identifying systemic issues and addressing them through advocacy so that the state may address these issues and prevent related problems in the future. The state's program is the largest in the country, but lacks adequate funding. There are currently 1,500 facilities in New York State and more than 160,000 residents who are entitled to ombudsman services. LICOP's funding has remained entirely flat for over 10 years. This is despite the imposition of additional mandates on the program. As a consequence, there is inadequate staffing and residents do not have support of an independent, conflict-free, trained, certified ombudsman. Why is LICOP unique? LICOP is unique because we find cases that require intervention and ensures that these cases are known to the State Office of Aging as well as the New York State Department of Health. It identifies and prevents discharges of residents residing in long-term care facilities to homeless shelters. We also identify problems such as low staffing, residents being financially exploited, residents who are emotionally and physically abused and fail in care, including malnutrition as well as ulcers. We're asking that the Senate please increase our funding by $3 million, which Governor Cuomo has not provided any assistance of increase to our funding in the past 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Tony Santi-Cate.
Move the mic closer, thank you.
I noticed that the state legislature recently voted to give Governor Cuomo a $50,000 raise. $25,000 this year and another $25,000 next year. I had a $22 increase in my Social Security benefit this year. And then the state reduced my SNAP benefit by almost $10. Is that the way we the people works? I'm here today to speak for those without a voice, the most vulnerable people in New York, those that depend on Medicaid in order to keep living. I am one of those people. New York leads the nation in prioritizing affordable quality coverage, despite aggressive efforts to harm it at the federal level. Yet, looking at the cuts being made to health care, it seems that our governor is taking lessons from President Trump. New York City provides a majority of the money to feed the state's budget, yet we continue to get crapped on. Now we are told to limit our spending on Medicaid or take the excess from our city budget. The governor's plan is to reward counties that keep Medicaid costs down and punish large cities with large populations of needy people like me. Doesn't he know that medical costs continue to rise year after year, greater than the rate of inflation? How will it affect moms who turn to public hospitals for breast cancer screenings, first graders in public schools who need vaccinations against diseases? What about older people who need a caretaker and have no family to take on the responsibility? Where does Governor Cuomo expect to dump that? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Heller. I'm an advocate in the CDPAP and managed long-term care space. And today I'd like to discuss the issue of home care hours and managed long-term care. As you may have read recently, a very disturbing and tragic story in the Bronx of an elderly woman who suffered from dementia, who wandered off alone at night and froze to death in the outside. Her daughter tried very hard to get her overnight hours to watch her, but was denied over and over again. This happened to us as we were a victim as well of managed long-term care not giving us as many hours as well. So I asked myself, is this an isolated case? Right? I mean, how many families across New York State are going through this? And I did some research into the Fair Hearing Archive database. And since 2012, there have been over 10,000 reversed cases. These are 10,000 trials where an independent judge looked over the medical records of consumers on managed long-term care and said, you're not getting enough hours, and told the managed long-term care companies to increase those hours. 10,000 cases last year, there were over 2,000 cases alone. This is a very serious problem. Now, as MRT2 meets again, we know that they're going to propose more cuts in managed long-term care, tighten regulations. So I have to ask the question, are the managed long-term care companies going to go even further? Are they going to use even more predatory business tactics to give less hours or not enroll people who need 24/7 care? And I'm afraid the answer to that is yes. So specifically what I'm asking, and I wish I had the colored piece of paper here, but I'm asking for a managed long-term care Bill of Rights. A simple, bright color piece of paper to all new enrollees in managed long-term care that very simply says, you have the right to all medically necessary hours you need. You have the right to a medical assessment free from intimidation, and you have the right to appeal that decision if you don't agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our next dramatic closing.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Elaine Connolly, and for the last 11 years, I've had the privilege of being a volunteer with the Osborne Association, an organization that supports families affected by incarceration. On any given day in New York State, over 100,000 children have an incarcerated parent, and most, if not all of these children, want to see their parents. Senator Krueger, I'm here today as a constituent to thank you for your past support and to urge you to include $3 million for Bill S-73-1A/A5942. This bill would reestablish buses to take families to visit their loved ones. Visits are a critical component, especially for children, to be able to see their incarcerated parent. Visits also support the rehabilitation of those incarcerated individuals. As a volunteer, I have seen over and over again how children who have regular visits with an incarcerated parent perform better in school and are better able to cope with their lives. Since 2011, when the buses were eliminated, the data shows that families are making fewer visits because most families do not have the financial means to travel to prisons that are on average 4 to 5 hours from where the families reside. Thank you, Senators, for your time and leadership.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Watkins. I'm president of CEC3, the Community Education Council and District on the Upper West Side and Lower Harlem. I'm here to talk about the budget in two areas of education. First is the full funding of the contracts for excellence, as ordered by New York State courts. And the second is our fervent opposition to any increase in charter school funding. Many public schools operate on a skeletal budget. They can't afford books, they can't afford librarians, they can't afford literacy coaches, they don't deliver vital special education services, and many don't have after-school programs, most don't have full-time nurses. Full funding of Foundation Aid will not solve all of these challenges, but it will get us part of the way. And I urge you to consider the pushback on this area. We must have full funding for the Foundation Aid. The charter school sector is the other area that I want to talk about. And what I want to say about that is the charter school sector was never meant to be its own school system, but that is what it has become. It continues to grow far beyond the intended 5% of a district population. And in Northern District 3, approximately 40% of families now opt for charter schools. There are some charter schools, for example, that have assets that are hundreds of millions of dollars, which equate to, there's one school, in fact, in the northern part of Manhattan, $66,000 per student in their assets. That some of the wealthiest private schools in New York City don't have endowments of this type. So why would taxpayers provide any additional funding for charter schools? We have CEC resolutions on both of these areas. I urge you to take a look at them. They're in my written testimony. And I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Tax the rich, fund our schools. Tax the rich, fund our schools. Tax the rich, fund our schools. Tax the rich, fund our schools.
Thank you. Again, if we can take our protests a little more quietly, just so that we're not interrupting the people testifying. Thank you. CUNY.
So my name is Timothy Hunter. I'm the student trustee for the City University of New York and representative student for all the students in CUNY. I completely agree with the sentiment. We need to tax the rich and we need to fund our schools, not just K through 12, but also higher education. Sitting in front of me, there are a lot of state senators, and there are some that are here, like Senator Jackson and Senator Benjamin. Together, you all represent 25,000 students that live in your district, and about 73,000 students that attend schools inside your district. These are not just students, these are also votes, and I hope that we keep that in mind, especially this year. And just do our due diligence in funding public higher education, because CUNY serves predominantly students of color, and if we don't invest in public higher education, especially at CUNY, we're just kind of telling these students that your higher education, your pursuit of that doesn't mean anything. And I think that playing the blame game with the governor and all the other people is not cutting it anymore, especially with the state senate majority. The big thing that I'm asking is the Senate to be a little bit more aggressive in their approaches. We heard Speaker Hasty go on record saying that he wants to kind of get $50 million for the TAC Act, and he opposes the governor's 5-year plan for tuition increases. Why hasn't the Senate released a statement on this? Why haven't we heard anything yet? And even Speaker Hasty saying that $50 million for the TAC Act, 25 for SUNY, 25 for CUNY, isn't enough. Because if you still authorize the board to increase tuition this year, the TAC Act is just going to widen back. I think it's simple math that we have some math people up here as well, and we have the chair of the finance committee and also the chair of another committee as well. And I think that, as we take a look at, CUNY, it's a vehicle for social upward mobility. And I think that with a little bit of remaining time, I do want to shout out a couple senators, especially Senator Hoylman, who also has a bill that will call for CUNY and SUNY to divest from fossil fuels. Where else to start with this than with public higher education? Get CUNY and SUNY to divest from fossil fuels, and I'm pretty sure the rest will follow. With the 10 seconds I have left, that bill number is S1829, just in case anybody wants to write it down, co-sponsor. Got you. And please, free tuition on the TAC Act and on CUNY Act. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is David Gerwin. I live on the west side, and I've been a professor at Queens College for 22 years, and for the last few, a union chapter chair. CUNY has been hollowed out by the budget of the last decade and longer. If a bridge collapses, somebody didn't inspect it. If you're stuck in traffic on a bus, you don't see the 20 years of bad planning or neglect that's led to your being late. You just blame yourself. That, I think, is why you're not hearing from students in the same way that you should be. This room should be packed by people. But what they see is that they didn't get a course because it got canceled. What they don't see is that the increased pressure on a $138 million budget at Queens College has left the provost to propose cutting 800 seats out of 1,000 that are available in writing intensive 152, 162W, like a mid-level course that you need as a transfer student or a sophomore to move on to your junior and senior year. And you won't get it if those cuts go through. And those cuts will save $68,000, and that's it. And why were they proposed? They were rescinded at the last minute. They were proposed because those are kids who pay flat rate, right? They're going to pay tuition, and they're going to take their courses, and if you shove them somewhere else, even though those classes are all fully enrolled, you can cut the adjuncts who are teaching them. And that will make CUNY a pay-to-play operation. If you can pay for your summer courses or your winter courses, then you can graduate in 4 to 6 years. But if you are on full tap or you're just paying flat rate, you will not be able to graduate. That is a red line that was crossed, and you didn't hear about it because the Queens College interim president and the provost didn't stand up and scream and say, this is unacceptable. But that's where we are with our funding cuts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Barbara Bowen. I'm a professor at CUNY and president of the Faculty and Staff Union. Members of the PSC see and appreciate the efforts each of you has made, especially this year, to prioritize increased funding for CUNY. But my message today is that even the increases currently under discussion in Albany, such as $50 million to narrow the TAP gap at both CUNY and SUNY, are nowhere near enough. The TAP gap at CUNY alone is $80 million and growing. The gap in unmet mandatory costs is another $126 million. $50 million for the TAP gap, which is, and split between CUNY and SUNY, is $50 million more than we saw last year, will not alleviate the current budget emergency of the kind that Tim and David spoke about. The only way to cover even the bare bones operating costs at CUNY, which serves tens of thousands of students in Manhattan, is to insist that New York State increase revenue by raising taxes on the very rich and abandon the arbitrary, cruel, and regressive 2% spending cap. Unless those two fundamental state policies are changed, the legislature will continue to be in the position of merely managing austerity. Your role will be to further divide and subdivide a dwindling economic pie to meet the urgent unmet needs that you're hearing about today. We elected you to do better than that. You have shown that you have the courage and the power to change other entrenched policies. You mentioned rent laws, others gay marriage, and many more. Now show the political will and change the most consequential policy of all, the budget. The arbitrary 2% spending cap is especially damaging to CUNY. First, it fails to account for increases in enrollment. Second, it includes tuition increases as part of increased state spending. And third, it assumes that the entire amount from tuition will be realized, which is never the case. So CUNY gets triply hurt by a policy that has nothing to do with economics and everything to do with politics. We call on you to change those policies. If you don't, it constitutes an attack on CUNY's 500,000 students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senators. My name is David Siffert. I'm here today as the President of the Village Independent Democrats. I'm also Director of Research and Projects at the Center on Civil Justice at NYU School of Law. In a past life, I was a tax lawyer, and I'm here to urge you to tax the rich. I submitted written testimony for the joint legislative hearing in Albany. I won't go over that in detail, but the quick summary is I spent a lot of time over the last few months talking to a lot of top tax policy experts and economists in the country. There is a complete consensus that increasing taxes on the rich is possible. It will not result in serious negative consequences in terms of rich people moving or effects to our economy. A lot of these taxes are complicated. It's not necessarily easy to structure any of these given tax proposals, but for a lot of them we already have bills, and I know each of you are very competent people. You're here for a reason. It requires work, but it's work that you're all capable of doing. So I'm just going to go over some of the ideas that seem to be sort of consensus among the academic community as good ideas. 3 of them are the top 3 from the Fiscal Policy Institute. which are the mark-to-market tax on unrealized capital gains of billionaires, which I think was being called wealth tax. There's the ultra-millionaires tax and the pied-à-terre tax. These have been around for a minute. They're very good ideas, and it's generally consensus that these are not hugely risky proposals. There are plenty of other ideas, so I'm going to go through as many as I can in my time. Commercial and residential vacancy taxes do a joint work of raising revenue and also pushing down rental prices for small businesses and for renters. We can conform to GILTI, which is a way of pulling back revenue that's being stashed overseas by big multinational corporations. The United States does it, New York City does it, New York State does it for some reason. It's a complete no-brainer. It was in the governor's budget last year. It's not in it this year. I only have 5 seconds left, so I'm just going to say that I can go on all day with ideas, but tax enforcement is a big one that's being left on the table right now. We can spend a little bit more money on enforcement and get positive returns from it. And overall, these are all consensus good policy. This is really possible. It's hard work, but it's possible. So I urge you, please prioritize raising taxes on the rich. We can do it, and we can make a better city.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Allison Downing, and this is a press release, which I asked you 6 to jointly issue tomorrow. It's in my submitted testimony as well, so you just need to copy and paste. We 6 Manhattan senators are thrilled to announce that we stand together, the Manhattan 6, if you will, against any budget that does not provide adequate funding for all of our constituents. We categorically reject these Hunger Games where the governor demands that we choose between the disabled and public housing, between kindergartners and college students, between domestic violence victims and the climate. These are false choices, and we hereby use, we being you guys, we hereby use our collective voice to tell all of our constituents, and indeed all New Yorkers, that we will not be complicit in these cruel and unnecessary choices. Therefore, we announce that we 6 will vote no on any budget that retains the governor's arbitrary and cruel 2% spending cap. We will vote no on any budget that does not seek revenue from our most fortunate citizens, those 9,000 unimaginably wealthy New Yorkers who have hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. The vast majority of these remarkably fortunate people are our constituents, your guys's. And we say to them, we are asking you to share a tiny fraction of your great good fortune with your neighbors. Thank you. To the rest of our constituents, we say, we got you. We won't make you fight against each other for scraps anymore. We see each of you and we hear each of you, and we will fight our hardest for each of you. To the governor, we say, we know you have great power in the budget process, and we know how you use the bully pulpit, but we also know that you cannot sign an unpassed bill. We must serve the many who elected us and vote no on any budget bill that does not deal fairly with all New Yorkers. If the governor chooses his spending cap and 112 billionaires over the interests of 20 million New Yorkers, that is on him. We will not be complicit, and there is little we can do but vote no on any unjust bill. To New York State, we say, we can imagine a state where all can prosper. We're on it. Thank you.
My name is Becky Salatin, and I'm a member of Indivisible Harlem, which is proudly supporting the Budget Justice Campaign. Unlike some of my fellow members, I'm not testifying today as a New Yorker who is personally suffering from fiscal austerity, nor am I here as an expert, although Indivisible Harlem is crawling, as you've heard, with healthcare workers and policy wonks. I'm just here to underscore that it's not only the suffering and the experts who care that our state is among the top 2 or 3 in wealth and #1 in inequality. That an austerity narrative has been used to normalize a state of crisis in schools and colleges, housing, healthcare, and environment. That even homeowners with decent wages are struggling to pay regressive property and local taxes that can't keep pace with cuts in state funding. All while our population of millionaires has exploded and our billionaires have amassed wealth equal to nearly 3 times our state budget, a budget that our current revenue setup allows them a range of ways to minimize contributing to. More than 9 in 10 New Yorkers, and the numbers are remarkably close across party lines, support taxing the very wealthiest among us to create a more equitable state. That number includes even some of the wealthiest among us, ask the patriotic millionaires. And it includes many like me, privileged New Yorkers who care about what rampant inequality and the chronic underfunding of urgent needs is doing to our state. It's time to change the tune. Not if only we could, but we have enough to create a better, fairer, more equitable home for us all. It's time for budget justice. It's time to tax the rich. Imagine a state where we all can prosper.
Hello. I have come here today to voice my support for budget justice. For centuries, New York has prided itself on being the place people come from across the country or across an ocean, where you can go and where you can arrive. But increasingly, it's the place you leave because you can't afford to live, the place you can't raise a family, the place where a fair shot costs an unfair sum. And it doesn't have to be. We can take care of our needs and we can take care of our neighbors if we choose to prioritize being a place where people live, not just a place where people can park their yacht. A city with overflowing homeless shelters and empty luxury condos built so high you don't have to see the suffering on the ground, it's not a city that can sustain itself. Teachers pay out of pocket to make sure our kids have school supplies, while those who make 40 times as much find loopholes that turn multi-million-dollar third homes into tax shelters. No firm foundation can be built on such inequality, and we cannot grow and prosper without solid ground to stand on. We are turning the rock beneath our feet to quicksand and ignoring the signs that we are sinking. There are $40 billion a year that can be put back into the state and its citizens without adding to the tax burden of the working or middle class. There's no better investment in New York. Thank you for your time.
And your name?
Oh, Deborah. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Michelle Gittleman. I'm with Budget Justice. I'm also a business school professor. And I'm here today to ask you to lead the fight to raise revenue by ending corporate welfare and taxing the very rich. I'm not here to say that it should be done, but that it must be done. Income inequality in New York is on a par with Colombia, Guatemala, and Honduras. That is unacceptable, and it's a direct result of our budget and tax policies. If you're very rich in New York State, you pay proportionately less in state and local taxes than the rest of us. Yet we're told that we cannot afford to invest in our communities. Austerity and lack of revenue are literally starving us. I want to talk about some of the arguments against ending corporate welfare and taxing the rich, and how these arguments are false and fly in the face of the evidence as established by research. We've been told that rich people will leave, and that's true. Many do leave, but it's not an argument not to do it. The research shows that even when you account for the mobility and tax avoidance that does happen, revenue raised still goes up. As for corporations, look at Amazon. 1 year later, they're back in New York, and they're adding more jobs than they would have if they had gotten the deal. Corporate welfare costs states about 40% in lost revenue, but there's no evidence of gains. We're told that taxes are too high already, and that's true too. New Yorkers pay the highest property taxes in the country, but that's because our towns and counties shoulder too much in government services, more than anywhere else in the country. This only reinforces the inequality spiral. Poor communities get terrible services, rich ones get great schools, roads, fire, police, etc. If we had a progressive tax system and redistributed that revenue, on average, everyone's taxes would go down and services would go up. I just want to add quickly, and I'll take some of your time, Deborah. None of the arguments against taxing the rich, take into account the long-term effect of trading economic austerity for economic security. What happens when you invest in better infrastructure, better educated students, affordable housing, healthcare, cleaner environment? These are investments that will contribute to growth, lower poverty, and increase the tax base. I would trade a few billionaires for that vision of our future.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, my name is Susan Mays Hill. New York State is encouraging individuals to take out long-term care insurance policies. Right now, there are only 420,000 individuals with policies in New York State. As a comparison, there are 6.5 million individuals on Medicaid, which costs New York State $60 billion a year. That is a huge drain on the budget. New York State gives a tax incentive of 20% for long-term care policies. That is an incentive. You can really create an incentive by raising the incentive to 50%. Instead of 20%, 50%. That will save the individual
taxpayers' money in the long run because they won't be added to the Medicaid rolls later on. I have long-term care insurance. I plan to never use it for me as a reassurance plan. I saw what happened to my mom's finances. During a 10-year period, she went from having money to having when she needed 24/7 care until she had nothing and she applied for Medicaid. 1 week after she passed, I was informed she had been accepted for Medicaid. I spent a good year of the year 2000 researching long-term care information and policies. I found one and have been paying for it since 2001. In 2008, I went on to a fixed income at Social Security. At that point, the policy was 5% of my income after taxes. Now it is 12%, again, after taxes. So my question is, what will you be able to do to help lower class and middle class, and it would be upper class too, unless you want to delineate how to create something that would help us and encourage people not to have to be in the Medicaid rolls later on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Hanna, I'm Director of Metro New York Healthcare for All, and I co-chair the steering committee for Healthcare for All New York. I have written testimony that I'll hand in, but I just want to summarize some of the high points. I'm here on behalf of a broad coalition of health coalitions that have come together around the Medicaid budget. And we challenge the governor's narrative on Medicaid. Medicaid is a success program in New York, and we should be very proud of it. We have one of the most robust Medicaid programs in the entire country, covering 6.5 million people, and it's been built over half a century by both bipartisan governors and legislatures. It covers a wide range of people, and it is often our go-to source when we have public health crises. And as we face the new situation with the COVID-19 virus, we're going to rely on Medicaid, I can guarantee you. So we do not have a deficit in Medicaid, we have a shortfall. And the solution is to raise enough money to pay for Medicaid. Medicaid is not a problem, it is a solution, and we just have to fund it. On behalf of this Protect Medicaid campaign, which is 8-wide sponsoring coalitions, and we now have 150 organizations endorsing our statement of principles, which I'll be giving you, we're calling on the state legislature and the governor to do 4 things. 1, return Medicaid's budget to the normal budget process and just use the MRT as a longer-term solution to develop program improvements. Go ahead and develop a one-house bill as best you can for Medicaid. 2, get rid of the Medicaid global cap and also the overall 2% growth cap. 3, reject any increase in the local share. And 4, raise revenues as the proper response by turning to the ultra-rich. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Feliciano. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission of the Public Health System, and we're part of the leadership that Mark is speaking about. But I want to touch on some areas that have not been discussed. You know, the rejection from CMS on District 2.0, the passing of changes to public charge, and federal cuts to safety net programs places communities at risk of losing access to essential services that support healthy living. The governor's own executive budget, and what I call his Medicaid hit squad, known as the Medicaid redesign team, only makes the current climate attacking our communities even worse. The same communities continue to be implicated by the decision, makes it critical to invest, close the budget gap to increase taxes, surcharges, and fees on economic actors that have profited from changes in the federal tax laws and are from state health funding. The savings can help so much. We wanted also to touch upon some other piece. Folks, you don't know, there was a discriminatory cut to New York City called Article 6 funding. It helps community-based organizations do the proper public health services. We see another cut coming down, and we wanted that to be rejected and restored back. But we also are talking about our safety net. And in the safety net, we have, in the Governor's 30-day amendment, we have a new offense that has been happening many times in health equity, the extension of the transition collar. And we want to make sure you modify Part F of that amendment, Section 21, indigent care pool. We have to minimize the impact of the cross-the-board cuts to Medicaid because it impacts our safety net greatly. The other part is I think there needs to be this principle of shared sacrifice that many of us are speaking on. There needs to be an assessment on placing a cap on the salaries of hospital executives, particularly in the voluntary hospitals. Our public hospitals have this already. There should be a review of current salaries in calculating the Medicaid reimbursement rates for each facility. There's no reason why Medicaid should subsidize their salaries. And I just want to add one thing here. There's structural racism and discrimination within our healthcare system. So when we don't value communities of color and marginalized communities, it makes it so easy for policies and the governor to actually devalue Medicaid and others by making cuts. What we really need to do is investment. That's what we need to care about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Patch. I'm on Community Board 8. I'm here to speak about the New York Health Act that I've been looking at and trying to get my arms around for the last 6 months. With respect, I believe I want what you want, which is a healthcare system that serves all New Yorkers, and I mean all. Having said that, that system should be available and accessible as possible. It should be as affordable as possible, and it should provide the highest quality care possible. That's a large challenge. As I understand it, this bill will not do that. First, the study suggests that with zero costs at the point of treatment, that demand will go up by 15%. That sounds like an understatement to me, but be that as it will, they say that's not a problem because the supply will only go up 7.5%. So I ask, who's going to manage or decide who falls in that gap? Are we going to have healthcare panels, what they used to call death panels in Albany? I think that's a problem. Second, on funding. The study suggests it's going to cost $139 billion in new taxes, and it may be possible to reduce the cost for 90% of the population and for business. That would be a good thing. And that the top 1, 3, 5, 7, 9% will have to pay extra. That may be the right way to do it, but I believe if you're going to pass the law, you should be explicit about how it's going to be funded rather than have that behind the curtain. Third, and probably by far the most important, how will it operate? I've spoken to the chair of an upstate health system that has 5 hospitals, 2 of which are in New York State, the vice chair of a major Long Island hospital system, and the director of government relations for Cornell Weill Hospital, where I'm on the community advisory board. The net of those conversations is that they can't say if it's going to work because they don't know how it's going to work. So we're going to change the structure and funding and foundation for our entire healthcare system without being able to say how it's going to work. Where they're making life and death and health and wellness decisions on an hourly or minute-by-minute basis. My concern is that we're going to end up with a New York healthcare czar who's trying to make these decisions, and I think we should know how it's going to work before we pass it. Thank you.
So I'll just pipe in here 1 second. This is a budget hearing, and there's a lot of things we don't know about what will or won't happen to the budget. And I'm not a gambler, but I would beg you that we're not going to suddenly see the New York Healthcare Act showing up as a section of the New York State budget.
Thank you.
But there are endless hearings and meetings and advocacy groups working on these issues. You're sitting next to some of them. I'm sure they'll be happy to let you know when the next discussions and hearings around exactly this topic are. But again, none of us think that's getting slid into a budget this year.
Thank you.
I'd like to see the objectives fulfilled, but realistically.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Betty Cooper Wallerstein. I'm very much appreciative of the opportunity to speak today to urge improvement in Medicaid fee-for-service reimbursement for nursing homes. Fee-for-service rates for nursing homes fall very short of what is needed for delivery of quality care. Under the price-based nursing home reimbursement model, facilities in New York State have not received an increase in their rates in more than 10 years. Medicaid reimbursement is the primary revenue source for the majority of the not-for-profit nursing homes. It is unsustainable for these facilities to continue to operate with flat revenue despite increasing costs. Every year their expenses go up. Staff unions increase 3%. Salary expenses go up 9%. I'm particularly aware what's happening with the dwindling number of nurses and nurses' aides at the Arch Care's Terrence Cardinal Cook Nursing Home, which is right nearby at 105th to 106 Fifth Avenue to Madison, entire block. There are over 600 residents in a total of 18 units, and it's the only facility that I know of in our country that has units for Huntington's chorea, an hereditary and so far incurable brain disease which affects all muscles in the body, causing inability to walk, talk, feed themselves, and eventually the muscles of the throat, and they're unable to eat. As a parent of a daughter with Huntington's, I see daily the damage done by the lack of staff. And the good staff we have are leaving because they're overstrained. I urge you to do an improvement in the money that is given for these nursing homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Tassler. I'm here on behalf of the Associated Medical Schools of New York. We represent the 17 medical schools of New York State, 6 of which are based in Manhattan. I'm here today to tell you about our budget priorities, funding for the Diversity in Medicine Program and Scholarship, and New York First and the Economic Development Program at the New York State Medical Schools. Part of the mission of AMSNY is to diversify the physician workforce in New York State. To that end, we've overseen diversity programs since 1985, and we currently oversee 6 programs. These programs were originally eliminated in the governor's 2020-2021 budget, but he restored the funding in the 38 amendments, for which we are very grateful. We encourage you to make sure that this funding remains in the enacted budget when it is finally passed. It is currently at FY 2019-2020 levels at $1.244 billion. We also urge you to fund the Diversity in Medicine Scholarship Program. Last year, the Senate for the first time contributed to funding this program, which provides 10 full scholarship medical school scholarships for underrepresented students who agree to practice in underserved areas in New York State once they have finished training. Last year, the Senate contributed, and we were extremely grateful, and we urge you to do that again. Our ask is $500,000 for that. I'm also here to talk about New York First, which is an economic development program, which funds grants to the medical schools to recruit and retain top scientists to the New York State medical schools. We are currently on our 3rd RFA, and the first cycle has generated a return of $6.50 on every state dollar invested. It's been very successful. We've recruited 13 top scientists and staff to the state, and we believe that it is a very impactful program to New York State's economic activity.
Thank you.
Oh boy, okay. Ooh, this is nerve-wracking. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for the lot of testimonies, so thank you for the thing.
Can you breathe a little bit closer to your mouth? Don't want to make you more nervous. We're just friends and family here, it's fine.
Excellent. I'm sweating a little. My name is Madeline Knight, and I am a resident of West Harlem. I've been a New York resident for about 10 years, and I serve as the Democratic County Committee representative for my district.
Hard to hear, I'm sorry, we're asking you to speak up a little more, thank you.
Okay, I can speak up.
And you can read along behind her also, if you're having, oh, you're having a mistake. You can change your seat if you're having trouble seeing to look there. Okay.
Okay, I am here today to express my concern not only for my community, but for New York as a whole. We need to take really drastic action to aggressively address the climate and inequality crisis that we face today. I am here as a young woman in her 20s who is terrified to start a family, not only because I can't afford it, but because I am so fearful of the planet that my future children would inherit. New York has one of the richest economies in the country, and we are home to some of the world's richest people, and yet we still see drastic and devastating inequality. And we know, based on science, that when the effects of the climate crisis continue to hit, those who are most vulnerable are those living under the poverty line, not some of our rich billionaires. I'm here in support of a robust Green New Deal that would support mass transit, clean, affordable housing, and a 100% renewable energy economy. However, this will require drastic funding, specifically $10 billion per year for the next several years in order to enact the kind of change that we need. As we know from the Paris Agreement, time is very much of the essence, and we are very quickly running out of time. $10 billion might seem like a lot, but it can be reached through a 5% marginal income tax on some of our top billionaires and New York's 1%. New York has the opportunity to be a leader in the fight against the climate crisis, and time is very much running out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question, did you say 10 million or 10 billion? What is it?
Billion.
All right, okay.
There was a whole earlier panel on this, so there's a lot of testimony on that topic. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Celine Shaw. Full disclosure, I used to be an intern at Liz Krueger's office, the Honorable Liz Krueger, back in 2006. I ran the Senior Advisory Board, and so thank you. I am here on behalf of Citizens Committee for New York City, a 45-year-old, I'd like to say, New York City institution. All we do is give grants to volunteer groups and grassroots organizations that do not have 501c3 status. And we also do a lot of advocacy around the bag bill. We were the only ones in the trenches in 2012, 2013 at NYCHA facilities handing out bags, because we knew that once this comes down the pipe, that there's going to be a lot of controversy about it, although personally I think there should be no controversy about it. But that's what we did, so in terms of advocacy. We also are for congestion pricing and for composting. I'd like to also personally thank the senators, the staff members for assisting Citizens Committee over the years and adding us to the state budget at a modest ask. It was $300,000. So these senators and assembly members are backing Citizens Committee for New York City very strongly. I'd like to mention that about 15 senators this year are supporting us in the budget. About 52 assembly members out of around 65 that represent New York City. That's a big chunk of assembly members and senators supporting Citizens Committee. I'd also just like to say that for everyone here, we have a lot of significant chairs here. We have the Senate Finance Chair, Revenue and Budget Chair, the Community Development and Housing Chair, the Judiciary Chair, and also I believe the City's Chair, Robert Jackson. So just for everyone to know that you can all meet them and discuss your issues, legislative or budget. So that's what I'd like to say, the public service announcement. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, senators. I am Stephen B. Jamal. I'm an undergraduate student at NYU and the president of the East Coast Coalition for Tolerance and Non-Discrimination, a nonprofit organization consisting of students from 13 colleges dedicated to promote social inclusion for previously marginalized people. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. In order to promote social inclusion for minorities, a systematic equity project necessitates appropriation. Our state budget should prioritize, number one, investing in high-quality educational programs in or near communities of color. By investing in and incentivizing state and local middle school, high school, and college programs, we can increase competitiveness of minorities in fields of growing employment opportunities, especially health professions, computer science, and green energy. Number two, diversifying the teaching profession through new regulations. As of today, about 80% of New York's 200,000 public school teachers were white. While just 8% were black, 7% were Hispanic, but another 3% were Asian. Yet over 57% of students are people of color. Student studies have shown that teachers who share ethnicity with students positively impact academic performance. This is why we need to fund diversity initiatives as part of New York Schools' improvement plan. Number three, increasing funding for the Civil Rights Bureau, which enforces laws protecting New Yorkers from discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, gender, religion, sexual orientation, disability, and beyond. More funding will enable the Bureau to further study and address the roots and patterns of discrimination, in addition to addressing symptoms. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you get two.
Hi, my name is Natalie Papia.
Papillon, and I'm here to make a case for legal marijuana in New York State. I'm not a cannabis industry lobbyist. I'm not even a cannabis consumer. I run a nonprofit that's focused on social equity in the cannabis industry. Quite millennial of me, I know. Why take on a role that scandalized literally every person in my network? Well, before this, I worked at Google, and one day a colleague casually mentioned that her father had started a $100 million hedge fund in the legal cannabis industry. I didn't think much of it. Later that night, I was quite angry. I went to Yale to study African American history, where I wrote a book on the history, the racially biased history of marijuana prohibition in this country, and the racism and xenophobia that led to the war on drugs and mass incarceration. And there's something so viscerally unjust about the fact a handful of wealthy, well-connected, disproportionately white business people will make hundreds of millions of dollars doing something we've walked generations of black and brown men up for centuries. As many of you all know, especially you, Senator Krueger, the CRTA does not go far enough in creating, in fulfilling our moral obligation to right the wrongs of the war on drugs by leveraging the momentum behind legal marijuana. And I spent the past year studying social equity initiatives in other legal states and across other industries and actually in other countries. And I have recommendations as to how we can create strong, comprehensive, robust social equity initiatives that ensure New York has the most equitable, diverse, and sustainable, as well as safe, legal cannabis industry in the country.
So when Brad and I are busy on the budget, we spend an enormous amount of time on that, so Brad, who's behind the screen there, you want to get to know him better afterwards and share. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Lisa Gesson, and I encourage the Manhattan State Senate delegation to include funds for each senator to make discretionary grants to nonprofit organizations in the budget. For smaller nonprofits, these grants are vital in carrying out our missions. For the past 18 years, I've worked at the Youth Service Opportunities Project, or YSOP, a small nonprofit located in District 28. YSOP introduces youth to volunteer service and the issues of homelessness and hunger, including hands-on service at soup kitchens, food pantries, urban gardens, and other agencies serving throughout New York City. Each program begins with an orientation to food insecurity and poverty, and concludes with students reflecting on their service experiences. We believe that this work that we're doing is vitally important to help youth become active citizens. With our modest budget, the grants from our elected officials help YSOP engage young people from diverse communities, public and private schools, and various religious groups, and to welcome all students to service, including students with disabilities. And this is where you come in. YSOP's state senator, Senator Krueger, has a depth of knowledge about the needs of folks in her district, as you all do in your districts. And this is so that you can help direct grants to organizations that help your constituents. You have resource guides to help residents access local services and helpful organizations. And state senators should be able to continue directing discretionary grants to nonprofits that serve the people in your districts. So that's all I have to say. I also have a cute photo of a bunch of our student participants because, like everybody else who's here testifying, what I'm speaking about are real people and real opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Shen. I'm a staff attorney at the National Employment Law Project. I'd like to talk about how this budget bill will exclude many low-paid, insecure workers from critical labor protections. Today we're facing a statewide crisis in which employers can unilaterally call their workers independent contractors just to cut payroll costs and to pad their bottom line, even where the workers don't get to enjoy any actual independence. An estimated 850,000 workers across the state are misclassified as contractors, and because of that, they work full-time to build someone else's business Yet they don't get any of the protections that only employees get, such as minimum wage, unemployment insurance, and workers' comp. The budget bill seems to include some steps to address this problem of misclassification, but it focuses exclusively on the so-called digital marketplace. Think about gig companies like Uber or Lyft. I want to be clear, to think of misclassification as just a gig problem is to miss the whole point. Only 20% of workers in the state who are misclassified receive their work through such a digital marketplace. And this legislation will leave behind the 700,000 workers who work outside the gig economy, including janitors, nail salon technicians, home care workers, and many others. This narrow focus on the digital marketplace can't even be considered a half measure because it quite literally doesn't solve for 50% of the problem. Our goal should be to solve the entire issue of misclassification, not just an arbitrary slice of it. And a better way to start, rather than this budget proposal, is to start by simply extending the Fair Play Act that we already have in construction and trucking, and to extend it to all workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Maria Figueroa. I'm Director of Labor and Policy Research at the Worker Institute of Cornell, New York State School of Industrial and Labor Relations. Well, I understand that the issue of misclassification is broader and not limited to the digital economy or the digital platforms that engage workers in New York State. I actually focus my remarks on the issues of the workers that are engaged through these digital platforms. That's the research that we've been focusing on over the last 2 years. And we've been able to uncover a lot of very pressing issues that also need a lot of attention. Among those issues, before I go to the issues, I'd like to also indicate that there is an estimated, the estimate of the number of workers who are engaged through digital apps in New York State is anywhere between 150,000 and even 500,000, because they don't necessarily work on these platforms throughout the month or full time. They have to work for multiple apps and rely on other jobs in order to make a living. So what we found through individual interviews, surveys of workers throughout the state, and consultation meetings with specific groups of workers is that the earnings are pretty low and unstable, and not each one of the individual platforms can generate enough work for them to make a living. Therefore, they have to work for 2, 3, and more apps at the same time. It's not, again, they have to rely on even public aid, because 1 out of 4, more than 1 out of 4 of the workers that we interviewed are doing so, which indicates that this type of employment is not adequate for people to make a living, and what it also indicates is that a lot of the costs that people are having to face are being transferred by the companies to the workers. And so the other issue that is very important to also bring up is that all of these workers, because they are not classified as employees, they are exposed to safety hazards on the job without any kind of compensation. And women in ride-hailing are exposed to sexual harassment.
Thank you very much. Thank you both.
So thank you for giving me a hearing, and not great with eye contact, but I think my words will be worthy of your attention. And I realize you're probably quite tired by now, but I run 2 freelance businesses that have taken me 30 years to build successfully. One is a band leader, another is a graphic designer. As a band leader, I'm hired by ever-changing clients in many different contexts. It would not be practical for any of them to hire me full-time. and my sidemen are also many and ever-changing. I cannot hire any of them full-time. As a freelance graphic designer, my clients are many and ever-changing. Not one of them would hire me full-time to design, say, a website or a PowerPoint presentation. I'm 60 years old, and so will never be hired full-time by a company. If forced to give up my freelance businesses, I'll have no alternative but to face permanent unemployment or to leave the state. For independent contractors older than me, the consequences will be more dire. But isn't this law needed to protect rideshare drivers whose employers exploit them by depriving them of benefits? First, Uber is not an employer. Uber is a broker that connects freelancers and their clients. And when Uber drivers were asked, what's the thing you care most about, 53% said salary, 37% said flexibility, and nearly none said benefits. In other words, like other freelancers, the protection these freelancers desire is protection from the law itself, not from the companies that connect them with their customers. The exploitation narrative comes not from freelancers, but from unions, who created it to gain public support for the passage of these laws in order to grow their membership. In California, New York, and across the country, facing the loss of their livelihoods, many Democrat freelancers have begun vowing to vote Republican. Thus, wherever and whenever this law is passed, any gains a politician might receive from increased union dollars will be offset by the loss of their former constituents. Please consider the consequences of what you're doing and reverse your course. It's not too late now for New York's freelancers or for yourselves, but very soon it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually think all three of you in 2 minutes each have highlighted why this issue is so complicated for us in the legislature, and why, with all due respect to my colleagues, I don't think it should be dealt with in the budget. It requires much more complex sorting through.
I would, by the way, be very pleased to meet with any of you, give you all my time. I know it's pretty hard to summarize. I really had to condense.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you, Senators, for this forum. My name is Lisa First. I'm the Director of the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance of New York, an advocacy and education coalition with nearly 3,000 members administered by Vibrant Emotional Health. I am urging you to advocate for adding an additional $2 million annual increase to the budget to increase funding for the Geriatric Mental Health and Chemical Dependence Demonstration Grants Program. This program, enacted by the Geriatric Mental Health Act of 2005, is operated by the New York State Office of Mental Health and has not had an increase in funding since its inception in 2006, despite its documented success in developing self-sustaining services for older New Yorkers with behavioral health needs. These projects have been funded through several cycles. They're now in their 4th iteration. They have focused primarily on the integration of physical and behavioral health services in both physical and behavioral health care settings. The projects have resulted both in useful lessons in the implementation of new programmatic concepts and, very importantly, in improved physical and behavioral health outcomes. These findings have been translated into ongoing services that sustain after the grant funding ends. So this is a huge return on the investment. Currently budgeted at $2 million, so we're looking at a doubling. The current phase of partnerships is a set of collaborations among local mental health, substance abuse, and aging service providers. The current phase of funding will end in 2021, and it is anticipated that these too will result in sustainable, community-based, integrated models of care for older New Yorkers with behavioral health needs. However, with an increase in funding, there is an opportunity to establish new projects to help older adults with serious behavioral health problems to age in place. This is critical for New York State's efforts to achieve long-term care reform by decreasing reliance on very expensive and often undesirable institutional services. This would include the movement of older adults from institutions like hospitals, nursing homes, adult homes, and prisons into community settings. It would also include providing supports to enable those who live in community settings to remain there by providing the services they need in the community. New York State has done far too little to address the vast demographic shift that began in 2011 that will lead to there being a greater number of older adults than children in the state in a short period of time,
Adding a $2 million annual increase to these mental health demonstration projects for older adults won't address everything, but it would lay the groundwork for a much more significant development over time and will address current challenges faced by the growing population of older New Yorkers living with behavioral health disorders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Nicole Pollinay, on behalf of New Yorkers for Safer Streets, representing 3,000 families. We ask that OMH and homeless housing funding focus on addressing unsheltered, seriously mentally ill through increased utilization of Kendra's Law, a public awareness campaign, increased implementation of assisted outpatient treatment, AOT, and prioritizing long-term supportive housing for these individuals. The current model compels mentally ill homeless to shelters, hospitals, jail, all of which exacerbate mental illness and come at a huge taxpayer expense. Nearly 40% of New Yorkers with serious mental illness are not receiving treatment. Kendra's Law is underutilized, underpublicized, and generally misunderstood. It should be a priority to educate the public through a public awareness campaign. 65% of New Yorkers who could qualify for AOT are not under court-appointed treatment. The courts and justice system should be educated on how and when to implement AOT. Long-term supportive housing must be funded specifically for this group who are screened out and often left out of current housing. It is a public safety issue when they remain on the streets, posing a risk to themselves and the public. This population must be prioritized and respond best to supportive housing. When utilized, Kendra's Law is highly effective, and when in place, AOT reduces homelessness, hospitalizations, and incarcerations by approximately 70%, saving taxpayers 50% of the cost of care. Supportive housing for mentally ill, seriously mentally ill, also shows a reduction in overall taxpayer costs. Raising public awareness to Kendra's Law, increasing utilization of AOT, and prioritizing supportive housing are in the best interest of the unsheltered, seriously mentally ill, and for thousands of families who are concerned with public safety in New York City.
My name is Pamela Wood. I'm a member of RAP, Release Aging People from Prison, and also a 10-year religious volunteer with New York State Correction Facilities. And the first thing I would like to suggest, which is not actually unconnected to some of the previous things mentioned, is the need for housing for people who are coming home, many of whom are elderly. And what happens is that people who have finished their sentences or who've gotten parole often remain in correctional facilities. I know somebody who's there for 5 months. It is more expensive to maintain somebody in prison than it is to maintain them on housing the outside. The second point I'd like to make is that we really need to think about our priorities in terms of how we spend money. The corrections budget is $4 billion a year. Of that, approximately $1 billion is to maintain elderly prisoners in prison. I know that a number of you have supported the Fair and Timely Parole Bill and also the Elder Parole Bill. And everybody has been asking for money, and I'm suggesting that by releasing people who have completed their sentences, their minimum sentences, have demonstrated that they've changed their lives, and I know many, are better off being released, becoming taxpayers in many cases, and that money that's saved then be devoted to crime prevention, which means addressing poverty, trauma, mental health, and drug addiction. How much better would we be if our thousands of children who are homeless were in homes? You get my point.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Mays. Distinguished members of this budget hearing, thank you for the invitation to offer testimony on a matter of grave urgency. Each person that takes the high office of the New York governor does so with the public expectation to improve upon the achievement of his or her predecessor. It is a travesty that in an hour that most of the country is grappling with how to improve the criminal legal system, The Governor Cuomo's budgetary address fails to mention the pathway to execute the principal objectives of our criminal legal system, namely rehabilitation and reentry and reintegration. Programs that prepare individuals who are incapacitated for qualitative, successful transmission back to their community. As a person that was incarcerated for over 3 decades, and the current co-chair of a group called Survivors of the System, I speak from the standpoint of tactic knowledge and personal experience. Currently, the majority of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision 32 programs are antiquated and obsolete. They offer no certifications or license credentials for employment upon release. Only a relatively few prisons offer college programs. The mainstay programs offered in DOCCS consists of porter, laundry, and basic kitchen type programs. Job skills that can potentially place incarcerated people into the job industry or do not translate into sustainable employment upon release are virtually non-existent. There are no job placement pathways. Job fairs offered at few transitional facilities effectively provide 0 jobs to individuals slated to be soon released. Moreover, the cognitive treatment programs established under Governor Pataki, namely anger replacement training, ART, and alcohol substance abuse treatment, ASAP, have been shown to be ineffective. To add insult to injury, individuals who completed these programs while incarcerated are required to take them again as a mandatory prerequisite to parole supervision, a requirement that impedes their ability to become gainfully employed. And I conclude by saying prisons are correctional facilities. Prisons are called correctional facilities because that's what taxpayers expect them to do. People are sent to these places to better themselves. The approach and strategy used by the current administration to intervene and seek to do so on the outside what can essentially be done on the inside. Employment upon release is a core need for successful transition. The lack of it can lead to homelessness, drain public assistance and support services, and can ultimately lead to recidivism. A budgetary address that does not mention a shift in evidence-based cognitive treatment programs and an upgrade in vocational trades for men and women released from incarceration fails and hurts all of us. This is unacceptable and inexcusable.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Hanlon. I'm here as a tenant advocate. Honorable Senators, thank you for this privilege to share my concerns for tenants being harassed by people like Senator Krueger helped put behind bars 15 or more years ago. But I'm very grateful for what you did in ensuring criminal landlord net justice. And anyway, so I want to ask your consideration to provide a budget for tenants facing environmental crisis due to landlord's negligence. A picture says more than anything, so I wanted you to see what I look like 20 minutes in the air of my room. That's from July 2018. That's after 2 years in court, in housing court, index 001340/16, where I actually thought securing violations meant they would stop. It didn't. The kind of managing agents that I have, Senator Krueger is very familiar with because one of them was a landlord of the Sahara Hotel and the Bond Hotel, Jay Wartsky. Very, very infamous past as a slumlord. So our air has been poisoned by chemicals, not limited to pesticide poisons up to 24 hours a day. So you know how an exterminator comes in for 3 minutes. Imagine the raid going on for 24 hours. So I'm here out of desperation, speaking for hundreds of tenants in my building. It's not safe, and thanks to New York State DEC agency violations issued in 2016, Governor Cuomo made sure an order on consent happened in 2017. That meant the manager, Roberto Goycochea, had to admit his wrongdoing, breaking 7 laws governing air quality. Costs for furthering tests that we cannot provide, but beyond our means, are emergency issues. So I ask that the budget consider things for emergency issues like environmental toxicologists, toxicology, blood, hair forensics, air hygienists. This is so beyond our capacity to provide those costs. experts to analyze, testify, and verify on, in a court case like mine that has been going on for years. So, and they're still poisoning us. So
Julie, I'm going to cut you off this time.
Thank you.
Again, it's not a budget issue, but I appreciate your coming to testify with. We have been working to expand the harassment bills and the protections since 15 years ago. You brought your whole legal case, so it's in Senator Serrano's district, so we'll make sure he gets a copy of the packet too.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
People have died, 18 people in 15 years. It's pretty substantial.
So please, why don't you introduce yourself and start?
Sure. My name is Neil Weissman on behalf of Complete George, which is 250 organizations and communities that are calling for expanded bikeways across the George Washington Bridge. I speak in support of Senator Jackson's budget request for $5 million per year for 10 years to widen the bridge's north path. Now, the George is the sole bikeable connector between 10 million residents of New York City and North Jersey. Its 7-foot paths are already dangerously overcrowded, with peak use exceeding East River bridges that are twice as wide. The George is now undergoing a $2 billion restoration, but the Port Authority plans to maintain those paths at 7 foot. This is a pedestrian standard. It is obsolete on arrival, and it will hobble the growth of cycling across the region for generations, impacting durable benefits annually worth hundreds of millions of dollars. For New York City's 800,000 cyclists, the George represents access to bikeable roads and green space west of the Hudson. For a region that will struggle to reduce greenhouse emissions, robust bikeways on arterial bridges like the George is the most cost-effective tool to reduce vehicle miles traveled. In a very short period, congestion pricing, repairs to the Hudson rail tunnels, and the onset of COVID-19 will dramatically upend regional travel patterns. In this context, widened paths across the George will safely support 20,000 commuters per day. That plus bike share and e-bikes are a potent alternative to driving in mass transit. And if funded in the current legislative session, new capacity could be online as soon as 2021. Thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you. I just want to also give a shout out to our borough president, Gail Krueger, who just showed up. And works hard for us every day, so thank you for joining us, Gail. Hi.
Hi. My name is Christine Berthe. I am the founder of a pedestrian safety advocacy on the west side. And the only thing after hearing all that is I say, I don't envy you. There are so many needs, and and choosing between all those needs seems completely impossible. So paradoxically, I'm going to start with housing. You know, unless we get housing right, transportation is not an issue, is less of an issue, and school is less of an issue, etc. So my first request of you would be to really give an enormous amount to homelessness and building housing for homelessness. We cannot accept in our good mind, you know, to have so many of our citizens and especially I would say families having so many children going to schools from housing. I don't know how much of a mental scar it does to these children. This is insane. So I would say if we had a good housing, we would need less transportation and we would need less of other services. Getting a lot of money to housing and housing for homeless and homeless families is critical. The second is give a lot of money to the MTA. We really need that fixed. We cannot afford not to fix that. First of all, because 30% of your pollution is coming from cars. So by fixing the MTA, you are fixing the problem for a lot of affordable, people who live in affordable housing, who live far away, and you are fixing the problem for the environment. And finally, I would say from a process standpoint, even though we have heard about a lot of things, I think trying to put the money, a lot of the money on the cause is more effective than sprinkling the money across everything. And I know this is very, very hard, but I know you're brave, I know you're smart, and I know you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Strauss, and I'm speaking on behalf of ESPA. Some of you may have missed me for a few years. I've been away, and now I'm back. Very happy to be back. The Empire State Passengers Association would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak and share ideas on improving intercity passenger rail service. Since 2008, federal law requires states to pay the full subsidy cost of Amtrak routes shorter than 750 miles. In New York State, that means that all Amtrak service north of New York City is funded by New York State, except for the Lakeshore Limited. Additionally, New York State is paying Amtrak more for the Long Island Railroad and Metro North's use of Amtrak assets in New York City, and these costs are buried in the MTA budget. Under this federal law, Amtrak serves as a vendor to New York State. Subject to negotiations with Amtrak, New York controls Amtrak service within the Empire State. This includes the amount of service offered, the frequency of service, the price of tickets, and the quantity and quality of onboard services. ESPA believes that the general public and the state legislature are not generally aware of this fact, and available data is hidden in the sole source contract with Amtrak. The governor has requested $44 million in his budget for the Amtrak contract. This is the same figure that the legislature has appropriated since 2013. ESPA recommends that the Senate support this appropriation and seek more information on the actual cost of the Amtrak service. We would like more information on whether Amtrak is providing the services which New York State taxpayers are funding. ESPA believes additional disclosures are the first step in improving transparency and greater accountability on the quality and quantity of Amtrak service. ESPA believes it's time for New York State DOT to begin building a robust state rail program similar to other states. New York State DOT has only 4 full-time rail division employees managing the state's passenger rail program. New York State's rail planning activities for the corridor are insufficient. Let me just mention 4 capital projects that if you fund this Green Deal, your upstate colleagues in the Senate would raise their eyebrows and be supportive. Number 1, replace the overaged dual-mode locomotives and M-fleet cars in the fleet. Number 2, replace the Livingston Avenue Bridge, rail bridge in Albany. Number 3, work for improvements in the Hudson Valley between Albany and Croton Harmon, where the MTA service begins. Federal funds are available to help us pay for this. We just need to apply. We have no program, no applications. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tasha Larapors. I'm from the Center for the Independence of the Disabled. I'm a community organizer for Accessoride, often known as Stressoride. Yes, for those who frequently use Accessoride, it's the type of service where you have to call 24 hours in advance to request a ride. In 2017, the MTA introduced a pilot program. They recruited 1,200 people with disabilities to test out what's known as an on-demand pilot program. It was a major success. A lot of people who used it. It was the same day service program. It was the same amount as bus or train, $275 round trip. Service reliability drastically improved. People called it life-changing. People were able to work full-time jobs, go to school, socialize. It was a major step forward. Unfortunately, the MTA decided last year that instead they were going to ration it, so it would be only 16 rides per month and up to $15 that the MTA would pay. The person would have to pay the remaining amount, unfortunately. Advocates reached out to legislators to continue the on-demand program. There are bills currently from Senator Leroy Comrie and Assemblyman Dinowitz to continue the program, to help continue funding. As I said, you know, the MTA right now is trying to ration it. 16 rides a month. I'm a Bronx native, and for me to go from the Bronx to Manhattan, it's not really going to work. 16 rides a month. So we asked the legislator to support our proposal to make travels to school work, social events, gatherings, more affordable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I realize we're under a time clock here, so I'll get right to it. I'm with Statewide Senior Action Council. I'm a volunteer. Lonnie, Gail, Maria, everyone sends their hellos. And many of you will be visited by statewide members over the next couple of weeks to make the following points as we've outlined in our written testimony. I'll do it quickly. On the issue of the budget, we feel that the governor's ploy to try to get the counties to pick up the additional costs is very cynical. We know from statewide conversations with our upstate members that many counties up there lack the wherewithal to even tax their own residents. So we ask that you push back hard on that. We also ask you to recognize that counties do not have the wherewithal to deal with what the real issue is here, which is the growing number of adults aging into the years when they need help, a declining number of family caregivers available to help them, and we don't have this in our testimony. Just yesterday, I read a statistic that the amount of debt being borne by those 65 plus throughout the country, and I don't have a New York State specific data point on this, up 358%. Now let's think about why that might have happened. We've got those of us whose earnings were decimated in 2008, and then we were in an age group that we could not get another job. So people spent down on that money. So it's not hard to understand why debt levels are higher amongst people that are now in their 60s, aging into 70, as a result of the legacy of 10, 15 years ago. So keep that in mind when you talk to the governor's office. The other thing we'd like to urge you to recognize is that this ploy of, if the MRT doesn't come up with enough of $2.5 billion worth of cuts, we're going to come to you, legislature, and you're going to have to make them across the board. That is another cynical, cornering boxing. So we ask that the state legislature fight back hard on that and insist that we slow that process down, bring consumers in, especially for long-term care. You know they're experts all over the state.
Thank you.
All right. We have to, I'm sorry.
And everybody's testimony is being, if you submitted testimony, we're putting it up online so everybody will have access to everyone's information. Hi.
Okay, I'm Cynthia Wisman. I've been so sad and so frustrated. Oh, so
And
sad.
you are?
I have a lot of voices. Sad.
Your name?
Cynthia Wisman.
Thank you.
I've been so sad and frustrated about these horrendous problems in our very special city. Segregation in the schools in New York now. Now back in the 60s, because I'm older than I look actually, you know, how could this be happening? How could we still have such terrible problems? And partly, I think, the country, the city itself, but the country itself hasn't really dealt with the racism in the way that it's needed to be. You have to look at and understand your history before you change your future, and we really haven't done a very good job about that. But I want to get back to the budget things. What I find is very important is the opportunities that people have. So I am of the generation, the post-World War II generation. The vets came back, public housing was made available. I was born in Brooklyn, I lived in a Quonset hut. Then when they had the projects open, I moved to a project in Flushing. So my whole youth was public housing. I became a college professor. I spent my whole life working at Bryn Mawr College, and I spent my whole life in activism, but also really teaching other people and talking with other people about social welfare, social work, social justice. And without those opportunities, people cannot contribute to the community. The community cannot be healthy if people don't have opportunities. To me, the housing is the most critical one because housing affects everything else. It affects the education. Think of early education, think of higher education, affected by where the housing is. So we have to deal with that. We have to deal with our educational system. And somebody up there get Byford back. Because and we can't have New York City without the subway.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. You're going to, okay.
Hello, my name is Alan Ander, and I work for CPA. I've been working there for over 25 years. I major in tax and budgeting, and I've been studying for my PhD as well. I have a whole lot going on. I've been working. So I wanted to speak about two things, most important. One is about interpreters for the deaf and hard of hearing people, and the second is about the deaf community. The first, about the interpreters, remember when people used to say that they have hearing loss and they don't know what that meant by hearing loss? The meaning of hearing loss is either deaf or hard of hearing. They either become deaf late, old age, blind, and those who have became deaf don't know how to sign, who had just recently got hearing loss. So for those 20 million people that live in New York, 8.6% of us that live in New York City, we have some that are living with loss of hearing, that are deaf. So I'm trying to make that a law in New York State, that if you become, so you either have to be licensed or practice in New York State, and I'm trying my best to get qualified interpreters for those who need that. So I'm hoping that the state helps me out and I make all the deaf people proud. Secondly, for the deaf community, more and more deaf people want a place where they can get together, discuss signing, use signing, and they all are hungry for communication. They all tend to communicate with just themselves, deaf people at home, or they have special telephones, you know, it's made for the deaf. It's just so much, a lot of deaf people use phones, and they use ASL over the phone. So, for the budget cost of that, I took care of that already. I did my figures, I started checking out the balances, seeing what they had, what they depended on, what the government has. I try to balance out what was missing within the deaf community, so I'm working on that. So I just want the interpreters to pass the state test, and I want them to be able to give the services that the deaf people need, because communication is a very important issue. So I have many more, but I'm limited to 2 minutes, so I don't want to go over your rules.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for supporting the deaf community.
Thank you. Rita.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Risa Levine, and I represent Resolve, the National Infertility Association, one of over 50 members of the Protecting Modern Families Coalition supporting the Child Parent Security Act, which should be included in the 2020 New York State budget. I first testified in front of the Assembly to reverse the ban on compensated gestational surrogacy in 2013. This ban was enacted after the Baby M case, when a woman was inseminated with the sperm of the intended father, carrying a fetus comprised of her own egg, and changed her mind after about fulfilling her contractual obligations after birth. Thereafter, New York State criminalized these contracts. Today, gestational surrogacy, where the surrogate has no genetic connection to the embryo she carries, is practiced all over the United States for the benefit of infertile and cancer patients who cannot carry a pregnancy to term, or gay couples who lack the necessary body parts to do so. Physicians, mental health professionals, surrogates, and intended parents agree that having no genetic connection is healthier, as supported by the majority report of the 2017 Task Force on Life and the Law. The task force recommended legalization of compensated gestational surrogacy, protections to safeguard all parties, and non-compliant surrogacy arrangements to remaining unenforceable. The progressive CPSA was drafted to resolve disputes over parentage and surrogacy, finding that surrogacy is different from adoption. Lack of clarity over parentage after birth is awful for a baby. Whose insurance governs? Who makes medical decisions? Who has financial obligations? As a longtime supporter of Senator Liz Krueger and former constituent and patient at a fertility clinic in her district, I'm gratified by Senator Krueger's recognition that compensated gestational surrogacy is a viable form of family building to which New Yorkers should have access. Thank you for that. I truly appreciate that. However, an 8-day waiting period sustains the current risks. If a surrogate is not bound by her contract, then how can the other party be? It flies in the face of contract law, putting the surrogate at risk of becoming an unwilling parent. And infertile people, 20 seconds, and infertile people who desperately want to become parents fear a surrogate in a hormonally charged 8 days after birth may take their baby away. This is not rational. The alternative bill would extend the barriers to surrogacy in New York State or return the parties to the BBM status quo, an unfortunate backward step. Fear of trafficking is not the same as evidence of trafficking. New Yorkers have been traveling to 47 states where surrogacy is not prohibited, with no claims of trafficking, but rather building families filled with love. The CPSA has been thoroughly vetted by all the stakeholders in surrogacy contracts, most especially the physicians and attorneys specializing in this area, and should be included in the 2020 budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually Jonah, Capital Owner. Thank you for your time, Senators. I am here representing PSC CUNY. I am a teacher at LaGuardia Community College and also Baruch College, and I am a voter in Senator Hoyland's district. And I'm here with a very simple message, which is just fully fund CUNY, fully fund CUNY, fully fund CUNY. I didn't bring with me any prepared testimony. I didn't bring with me notes. What I brought with me actually was a stack of my students. I brought with me a stack of my students' homework, and I've been grading quizzes as I've been sitting in the back on a Saturday afternoon. Very common story. I used to be a public high school teacher before I was a CUNY teacher, so I've seen from both sides how effective the CUNY system can be at raising people out of poverty, putting people on a track towards a professional class. However, the same cannot always be said of the people who teach at CUNY. Case in point, myself, I have a master's degree, 10 years experience, yet I rely on my spouse for my health care, and I make very little money, actually, on a month-to-month basis. So you could say I'm here out of enlightened self-interest. There's a lot of turnover in the CUNY schools, there's a lot of churn. So what hurts us as teachers also hurts the students. If you fully fund CUNY, then that can take away the argument that the administration has been making that they don't have enough money to pay us all fairly and compensate us all for the work that we do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you all. Hi, everyone. Please.
Marco Tamayo, architect, resident of the Upper East Side. There is no doubt that we have a profound crisis of affordable housing in New York City, and the need of more funds available for building affordable housing is paramount to balance the supply and demand of it. A good indicator is the present striking low 3.6% housing vacancy rate in New York City. Indeed, the demand for affordable housing is so big in New York City that 1.1 million of applicants HPD has received in the lottery program, even though HPD is claiming that 39,000 new affordable units has been included to the market, or a minuscule 2% into the housing demand, leaving the deficit of affordable housing in hundreds of thousands of affordable units. At community board level, our situation is much worse, 2.8% than the average median. Indeed, we have approximately 161,000 households in our community. 79,000 households are renters, from which 52% are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, and 23% are paying more than 50% of their income for rent. In short, 75% of our household renters in our community have less food in their refrigerators, less opportunities to buy clothing, less housing standards, in short, in the blink to become homeless. In conclusion, having a great deficit of affordable housing in the hundreds of thousands, the lack of lots available and the construction costs are very high to build affordable housing, it is crucial to increase more funds to produce affordable housing along with other policies. Thus, this would reduce the income expenses for housing and improve the living conditions in many thousands of households in our community and the city, creating a more fair and inclusive city for all.
Thank you. Hi.
Good afternoon, Senator Krueger, Senator Benjamin, and Senator Hoylman. My name is John McFarland. I am a Civil Rights Union leader with Vocal New York. I'm here to say a few words about taxing the rich and how that would apply to people from low-income communities like me. I want to first say that it is a obscenity that individuals like Michael Bloomberg, a lifelong Republican turned Democrat, attempting to buy the presidency currently, Jeff Bezos, Rupert Murdoch, and sport team owners like those of the NFL, NBA, and MLB are allowed to skirt the system by paying taxes at a much lower rate than many of the people in this room right now. It's also a travesty that most billion-dollar corporations pay no taxes at all, while the common man has to dig into his and her pocket every year before April 15th to find enough points to pay their share of federal and state taxes. These corporations specialize in profiting off of the backs, the blood and the sweat of black and brown and low-income people via scarce and inadequate health coverage and salaries that often fall way short of the federal poverty line index. Is it too much to ask these same corporate honchos, hedge fund managers, and casino owners to pay a couple of a couple of cents per dollar to guarantee sustainable resources for all of us? Sustainable resources like community investments in the form of very affordable housing, education, mental health, employment, and reentry resources for the formerly incarcerated. In closing, I ask that the legislature pass a fair and equitable budget by taxing billions now and fully fund CUNY.
Thank you. How are you?
Hi, my name is Warren Berger. I will try to keep this testimony short because I realize there's not much time and I can give you a copy of the full testimony. My name is Warren Berger and I'm a constituent of State Senator Robert Jackson. I am working for the Movement for a Green New Deal, a coalition of the organizations Food and Water Action, the Sunrise Movement, New York Communities for Change, and the Democratic Socialists of America. We would like the governor and the state legislature to enact the following policies to build a Green New Deal. First, stopping all fossil fuel infrastructure. Second, having public power. Third, a 100% renewable energy. And finally, taxing the rich to fund a rapid just transition to a renewable energy economy, which would cost about $10 billion a year. New York needs a Green New Deal. We call upon you to embrace the goals and policies to create a safer, more just society.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thank you, Senators Hoylman, Benjamin, and Senator Krueger. Thank you for your stamina for being here from start to finish. Really appreciate it. My name is Billy Freeland, and I'm here as a concerned citizen who has read in the news that there may be an effort in the budget to address bail reform and potentially reverse some of the gains that were made last year. The bail reform enacted last year sought to eradicate a two-tiered system of justice, and while it didn't eradicate it completely, it did curtail the system where we have one sense of justice for the wealthy and the rich and another for the poor. I'm worried that this current budget is going to make a major step back from that progress. And in particular, one thing that bail reform did is it recognized the destructive nature of incarceration and jail. To quote our esteemed former Chief Judge, Jonathan Lippman, quote, "The consequences of just a few days in jail can mean losing your job, education, reputation, and even your housing or custody of your children," issues that we've talked about today. He said studies indicate that sending someone to jail for even a short period of time makes it more likely that they will return to jail in the future. And let's think about that for a second. There are costs. It's not just safety in terms of do we incarcerate someone who's accused of a crime, but it's how do we treat people to ensure that they're not accused of committing a crime again. And to get specific, people held pretrial are 13% more likely to be convicted and receive 42% longer prison sentences. I'm worried that after a mere 2 months of bail reform, less than 1 month of inconclusive data, we're going to render a judgment that even the NYPD's chief statistician, Chief Michael LaPetri, did not reach when he spoke about the January statistics. And there's a larger question here. We all talk about the politics of Willie Horton, the politics of the Central Park Five. Those are the politics of a previous generation. My question, Senators, is our generation going to fall for the same fear-mongering politics of those generations? It's easy to say no, but when you take a hard vote, that's when the true test will be. I hope you will vote against any budget that rolls back bail reform in New York State. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you. Hi, Wendy, we'll let you close.
Hi, well, thank you so much. Thank you all for providing this forum for us to come to you. I'm coming as a private citizen. My name is Wendy McAvar. I live in New York City. And we've made such tremendous strides. New York State has committed to the Paris Climate Accord, and we've made tremendous strides already in our car emissions and in changing over to fuel of buses. But all of that, and all of light industry and all the other pollution counts for about 25 to 33% of our climate change emissions. What accounts for 67 to 75% of our climate change emissions are buildings, particularly in New York City. We're a very fragile environment. 4 of our 5 boroughs are on islands. We don't like to think of ourselves that way. We like to think of ourselves as the strong and the mighty built on granite. Our 5th borough is built on a peninsula, also very subject to the tides of the Atlantic. The entire economy of New York State is very much intertwined with the well-being of New York City. We're very vulnerable. We're asking the state to get involved on environmental grounds for a reasonable 210-foot height cap, because there is scientific evidence that above that rate we have an exponential amount of climate change pollution that is not present in those levels below that, below the 210 height cap. And in addition to the emissions, there's also the heat island effect, the interaction between the large buildings. So the more you build, the more the exponential rate of climate change pollution grows. And as for carbon dioxide, we know that that can last in the atmosphere for the common figure that's bandied about is 200 years. Some studies say it's much more than that. A few studies say that there's some carbon that can be recaptured and put back into the earth. But we don't have the technology developed for that. We're looking forward to it, but we really need the state's help for an environmental measure. I'm happy to help anybody with drafting of the legislation.
Thank you.